So the first thing which I am discussing right now is variants of Turing machines. Now, as we all know, in the earlier classes we have discussed that a standard Turing machine is a 7-tuple machine which has a set of finite states, set of input alphabets, transition function, initial or starting state, set of final or accepting states, a blank symbol on the tape, and a finite set of tape alphabets. And the standard Turing machine, which we say that standard, has these features, that is, it is deterministic. Deterministic means that corresponding to every input there is only one transition. Input is placed on an infinite long tape. Machine can read the input from the tape one cell at a time and write the output to the tape one cell at a time. And the tape head can move either in left direction or in right direction. Now, if we talk about the variants, that means variants of this standard Turing machine. So we are really discussing 5 variants. First is stay option, second is semi-infinite, third is multi-tape, fourth is multidimensional, and the last one is non-deterministic. If I say that these are the 5 variants, this is for sure that all these variants can perform the operations which can be performed by a standard Turing machine. The first Turing machine, so I can say that both classes of Turing machine accept the same languages. That means if there is any machine M1 for first class and there is a second machine M2 for second class, there exists a language which is accepted by M1, it is also accepted by M2. So that means language which is accepted by a standard Turing machine is also accepted by its variant. Now first machine which I am discussing is stay option Turing machine. In the earlier Turing machines which we discussed in the last 2 classes, we had that there are 2 head movements, one is towards left and another is towards right. There are only 2 options. But the stay option Turing machine is the machine which introduces a third head movement, that is, it can read a symbol from the tape, it can write a symbol on the tape, and the head can remain on that particular position only. That means instead of moving left or right, the head can stay as it is on the same cell. Just see this, I have shown this by a capital symbol S, the stay option machine, and I have shown it read A from the tape, write B on that particular cell of the tape, and it stays there only. It is, the head is neither moving left nor moving right. This is another example which I have shown. If I have ABL, that means it will, here is the head, it will read A, it will write B and move towards left. ABR, it will read A, it will write B and move towards right. If I say, sorry, this is S, ABS, it reads A, write B and it stays there only. So this is stay option machine, a variant of standard Turing machine. Second variant of standard Turing machine is semi-infinite tape Turing machine. What is the role of this variant? How does this variant works? This variant divides the input tape into 2 parts. One is the left part and another is the right part. The reference point, there is a reference point which divides the machine into 2 parts, right and left, and no left movement is allowed when the read write head is at left boundary. Just see this. We have infinite long tape. We will divide this tape into 2 parts based upon the reference point. It is not necessary that the reference point should be in the middle. It can be anywhere. The right part is inserted as it is BAA delta delta, and a hash symbol is placed before B to indicate that this is the point where the machine has been split. Likewise, the left part is put on the other half. Just see that this is put in reverse. First point from left was A, so A is here. Next was A, this A is here. Then third one was B, this B is placed, and finally this B is placed. If I combine these two, this is how we actually get. We have a reference point. The right part is on the right of the reference point. All the inputs BAA as it is placed, but this input is placed in reverse, AA, BB. Fine. So this is about semi-infinite Turing machine. Now how this functions, just see this. This is a standard machine. In a standard machine, I have read A, my tape head is at this point, read A, write B and move left. It will do this. If I go to semi-infinite Turing machine, my right head is the read write head is at this point. That means on the right side of the tape, what it will do, it will read A, it will write B and move left. How this movement will take place? Read A from here, write B to this and move one step left. Fine. And left will remain as it is. If I say that my head, instead of on the right side of the reference point, is on left side of the reference point, this is how it will happen. Now what will happen is that since the head was on left part, it will replace this in a way that it will read from left part, right to left part and move one step right. Please see that in this case, there is no movement on right part. In the previous case, there was no movement in the left part. So this is the second variant of Turing machine, that is semi-infinite Turing machine. Then third Turing machine variant is multi-track Turing machines. In this, we are considering that instead of having a single track or a single infinite long tape, we are having more than one tapes. And corresponding to each tape, there is a read and write move on every track. Again, the movement is restricted to two directions only, that is either left or right. Just see this example of a multi-track Turing machine. I have two tracks. This is an example of two-track Turing machine. Fine. Just see how this will work. The input in this case will be AB, that is read from track 1 and track 2, write BC, that means write B instead of A on track 1, write C instead of B on track 2 and then move one step left. This is how the operation will be performed. AB, BC written and the arrow is moving one step left when we have a transition from state Q1 to state Q2. Then next we have fourth variant, multi-dimensional Turing machine. In this case, instead of having only 2, 3, 4 or 5 tracks, that is multi-tape, we are having multi-dimensional Turing machine. That means we are having tapes at various dimensions. Right now, which I am discussing is a 2-dimension Turing machine, and we are having 4 movements in the head, left, right, up and down. This is just an example diagram of this multi-dimensional Turing machine. How we will proceed in this case, this is how we point the direction of head. Now, if I say that in this multi-dimension Turing machine, which is an example of 2D Turing machine, if I say that my head is at this particular point, the position will be indicated by +1, that is Y position, followed by X position, which indicates that it is at right now 2 points right of Y, 1 point above X, up and down, it is indicated by plus sign. Similarly, if I have head at this point, my head position will be -1, -2. That means my axis, y-axis is at -1 point and my x-axis is at -2 point. This is how we show the moves in a movement of head in a multi-dimensional Turing machine. Now the last variant is non-deterministic Turing machine. Why are we saying this as a variant? Because in a standard Turing machine, it is assumed that we have deterministic component only. That is, corresponding to single input, we will have only one output. But the variant of one of the variants of Turing machine, of standard Turing machine, is also non-deterministic Turing machine. So in this case, as we can see, if I have a movement from Q0 to Q1, it will be read A, write B, move right. On the other hand, if I have a movement read A, write C and move left, if I move from Q0 to Q2, which I have expressed this diagrammatically. Fine. So these are the 5 variants which I have discussed right now with you. This is one of the components of theory part of Turing machines. Now I'll be discussing next theory component of Turing machines, which will cover following topics. One is recursive and recursively enumerable languages. Next is Chomsky hierarchy. Third is Church thesis, and fourth is P and NP type of problems. As far as recursive and recursively enumerable languages are concerned, they are connected with Turing machines. So whenever we talk about Turing machines, as I discussed in the first Turing machine lecture also, there are 3 possible outcomes of execution of a Turing machine. It will either halt by accepting the input, that means it will go to the final state, or it will halt by moving to a crash state, which we say that the machine has halted and the input has been rejected. The third state, which is a very important component of Turing machine, is that it may never halt, it will loop forever. That means it will neither accept nor reject, instead it will loop forever. I considered one example in my first lecture on Turing machines also, that there might be a situation where it may loop forever. So the 3 outcomes of a Turing machine are halt and accept, halt and reject, never halt, that is loop forever. Now, what do you mean by recursive language? A language is recursive if there exists a Turing machine that accepts every string of the language and rejects every string that is not in the language. That means we are having only 2 states. First is it will halt in final state if the string is part of the language, and it will halt in non-final state if the string is not part of the language. Now comes second type of language, which is recursively enumerable language. That means in this case, we have 2 conditions. A language is recursively enumerable if there exists a Turing machine that accepts every string and does not accept that are not in language, but it may cause the Turing machine to go into infinite loop. So that means it will halt in final state if W belongs to L, and it will halt in non-final state or loop forever if W does not belongs to L. These languages are also called Turing acceptable and Turing recognizable languages. Just see this. What do you mean by recognizing and deciding? Recognizing means that there exists a state such that for all strings, W will either go to L, that means it will reach a accept state, or it will reach a reject state, or it may loop forever. Decidable means that it is decided, either it will accept or it will reject. It is recognizable means it may accept, it may reject, or loop forever. So that means first portion basically says recursively enumerable languages. Second portion says simple recursive languages. So we can say that every recursive language is a part of recursively enumerable languages, which is part of non-recursive languages. Next we have Chomsky hierarchy, one of the most important component of theory of computations. In case you know this particular hierarchy, that means you know complete theory of computations. This is the crux of entire theory of computations. We have 4 type of languages: type 0, type 1, type 2, and type 3. All the languages, regular languages, which we considered in finite automata, and the grammar which we considered as finite state grammar, is type 3. Type 2 language consists of context free languages, context-free grammar, and the automata which we build corresponding to type 2 languages was push-down automata. Third comes context-sensitive languages, not covered as part of our syllabus, but they are type 1 languages, and the automata which is used for this is linear bound machines. And the last one is type 0, which has Turing machines. That means it has all the languages which we can consider. Now, if I just go through these 4 types, type 0, type 1, type 2, and type 3, I can say that type 3 is also included in 2, 1, and 0. Likewise, type 2 is included in 1 and 0. Type 1 is included in type 0. So, this table along with this diagram is the summary of entire theory of computations. Type 3, type 2, type 1, and type 0 languages. Type 3 is subset of 2, 1, and 0. 2 is a subset of 1 and 0. 1 is a subset of 0. Next, we come to Church-Turing thesis. It says that if some calculation is effectively carried out by an algorithm, then there exists a Turing machine which will compute that calculation. That means any mechanical computation can be performed by a Turing machine. As I said to you in the first class itself, that Turing machine is modern day computer. There is a Turing machine N corresponding to every computable problem. We can model any mechanical computer with a Turing machine. Set of languages that can be decided by a Turing machine is identical to set of languages that can be decided by any mechanical computing machine. If there is no Turing machine that decides problem P, then there is no algorithm that solves problem P. This is for sure. That means for every computationally solvable problem, there exists a Turing machine. So Turing machine is one of the most important component of entire computer science. Any algorithm which can efficiently give output for a particular problem can definitely be designed with the help of a Turing machine. Now we come to one important thing which I don't know whether you have covered in other courses or not. P type of problems and NP type of problems. Why do we do this? Suppose we have a particular algorithm for a particular problem. How do we define that? What is the execution time of this algorithm? Computer science is largely concerned with a single question: how long does it take to execute a given algorithm? But computer scientists don't give the answer in minutes or milliseconds. They give it in relative to the number of elements the algorithm has to manipulate. This is what we call as time complexity of a particular algorithm. Algorithm's execution time is thus directly proportional to number of elements it's handling. Many common algorithms have execution times proportional to n square, log n, n cube, or so on. Fine. Now, what are P type of problems? All the problems which can be solved in polynomial time by a deterministic Turing machine are called P type of problems. If the running time is some polynomial function of size of input, that is n, for instance, if the algorithms run in linear time order of n, or quadratic time order of n square, or cubic time order of n cube, then we say algorithm runs in polynomial time and problem is solved in class P. Now, what is NP type of problem? NP means non-deterministic polynomial time. That means we know that the problem can be solved, but we cannot give the time compulsorily that it will be solved in this particular time. We cannot give the order in which the problem will be solved. So NP is set of decision problems. Decision problem means yes, yes or no that are solvable in non-deterministic polynomial time. That means they can be solved in polynomial time by a non-deterministic Turing machine. There are a lot of programs that don't run in polynomial time on a regular computer, but do run in a polynomial time on non-deterministic Turing machine. These problems are called non-deterministic polynomial time problems. Please remember that a non-deterministic Turing machine can do everything a regular Turing machine, a regular computer can do. Now just come to the last point, which will give you more clarity about this, what we are talking about. Many a times it happens that we can verify that this particular problem will be solved in polynomial time, but we cannot give a concrete solution that it will be solved in n square, in n cube, or n to the power x time. So that is why fourth point says an equivalent way to define NP is by pointing to the problem that can be verified in polynomial, that it can be only verified. Remember that it will be solved. This means that it is not necessarily a polynomial time way to find a solution, but once you have a solution, it only takes polynomial time to verify that it is correct. So every problem of P type definitely belongs to NP type of problem. Now NP is further divided into two parts, NP hard and NP complete. First point arises, that means is every P equal to NP? If the solution of a problem can be verified in polynomial time, can it be found in polynomial time? The vast majority of NP problems whose solution seems to require exponential time are what's called NP complete type of problems, meaning that a polynomial solution to one can be adapted to solve all these problems. And in real life, NP complete are fairly common, especially in large scheduling tasks. Most important is, I hope you have covered in many of the algorithm related subjects, traveling salesman problems, where we say, given n cities and distance between them, can you find a route that hits all of them but is shorter than the previous one? NP problems are checkable in polynomial time, means that given a solution, we can check that whether the solution is correct or not in polynomial time. So if we can verify that a particular problem will be solved, only verify, we say that it is NP complete. Then what is NP hard? What does NP hard means? A lot of times you can solve a problem by reducing it to different problems. I can reduce problem B to problem A. If given a solution to problem A, I can easily construct a solution for problem B. If a problem is NP hard, non-polynomial time hard, this means I can reduce any problem in NP to that problem. This means if I can solve this problem, I can easily solve a problem in NP time. Now if I come to NP complete is a problem which is both NP hard and in non-polynomial time. Just see this particular diagram. P type of problems, all the problems which can be solved in polynomial time. NP type of problems, all the problems which can not be solved in polynomial but can be verified that they can be solved in polynomial time. Further, NP is divided into two parts. One is NP hard, another is NP complete. NP hard are all those type of problems which are not verifiable but can be verified at some point of time. NP complete is all which can be verified. Every P type of problem is a subset of NP type of